Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to class this week in our second class for the Tantra course here. So I'll just okay, hang on here to reset my phone. Before we get started, I just wanted to make a little bit of a recommendation for a book. Uh, there's so many good books to read, and I just sort of don't want to get bogged down in all the different sort of references and this and that. I want to sort of stick to the text that we have. But and just in terms of Buddhist psychology and either Tantra or Buddhism, there's so much there. There's an amazing amount of stuff. But one that I really like, Mark Epstein he's a psychotherapist. He's written a number of books. Some of them are a little older now on psychotherapy or psychology and Buddhism. I think he did one that was maybe 25, 30 years ago called, what is it? How to Go to Pieces Without Falling Apart or something. It's kind of funny, right? Like it's kind of a cute uh sort of inside joke for therapy. But he did one. I'm trying to see when this was. Let me just take a look. This is 2005. So 20 years old now. People might have read it or seen it. It's called Open to Desire, What the Buddha Taught. So this is the cover here. And it's a great book, easy to read, but just going on in some ways, it might be a little bit of a good bridge just on your own time between Lama Yeshe's book and the stuff we're doing Tantra, starting with Rob Preece, because it's a good sort of positive understanding of how desire functions in Buddhism and also in terms of Western psychology or psychotherapy. Because I don't want to get into it, but usually what we have is a model of desire in the West because of our Judeo-Christian background is the idea of desire being a lack, a lack. And so, what does that mean? Like, is this lack something that can be fulfilled? It's dissatisfied and blah, 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 blah. And so he's taking that sort of idea, sort of a Western idea of desire as a lack, but using sort of Buddhism as a way of understanding and also coming up with sort of a solution, which ends up being a little bit of a Spinozist or Nietzschean one, which is that this lack can actually be seen as a fullness. So just like emptiness is a absence of inherent existence, but also they bring this up a lot in the Nyingma tradition. It's also a fullness. Why? Because all conventional reality arises in and out of emptiness. So out of this lack, in other words, something comes from nothing, you could say. So it's the same thing with this great one on book on desire. And there's some parts in it, I think, where it's more of a sutric level, but there's parts of this book that really, really do shine. So a little bit of a plug for this book, Mark Epstein, Open to Desire. Great book. Okay, let's start with the Heart Sutra here. Homage to perfection, wisdom, the Blessed Mother. Thus I've heard at one time the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajgir in Mass Vulture's Mountain, great assembly of monks and nuns, and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. That time the Blessed One was absorbed in the concentration of countless aspects of phenomena called profound illumination. That time also Spirit Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva, the great being, was looking perfectly at the practice of profound perfection and wisdom, looking perfectly also at the five aggregates being empty of inherent existence. Then, through the power of Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to Spirit Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva, the great being, how should a son of the lineage train who wishes to engage in the practice of perfection and wisdom? Thus he spoke, and Spirit Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva, the great being, replied to Venerable Shariputra as follows. Shariputra, whatever son or daughter of the lineage wishes to engage in the practice of profound perfection of wisdom should look perfectly like this. Subsequently, looking perfectly and correctly also the five aggregates being empty of inherent existence. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is none other than form, form's none other than emptiness. Likewise, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are emptiness, having no characteristics, not producing, do not cease. They have no defilement, no separation from defilement. They have no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, and no consciousness. There is no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mentality, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no tactile object, no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so forth, up to no mentality element, also up to no element of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance, no exhaustion of ignorance, and so forth, up to no aging and death, no exhaustion of aging and death. Likewise, there's no suffering, origin, cessation, or path, no exalted awareness, no attainment, also no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, because there's no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and abide in the perfection of wisdom. Their minds have no obstructions and no fear. Passing utterly beyond perversity, they attain the final nirvana. Also, all Buddhas reside perfectly in the three times, having relied upon the perfection wisdom, became manifest, complete Buddhas in a state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of perfection, wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the equal and the unequaled mantra, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, since it's not false, should be known as the truth. The mantra of perfection, wisdom is proclaimed, Tayata Gata Gata Paragata Parsam Gati Puri Soha. Shariputra Bodhisattva, great beings should train the profound perfection wisdom like this. Then the Blessed One arose from that concentration and said to Spirit Velokshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, that he'd spoken well. Good, O son of Lynch, it's like that. Since it's like that, just as you have revealed, in that way the profound perfection wisdom should be practiced, and the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra, Spirit of Velokshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, and the entire circle of disciples, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, demigods, and spirits, were delighted and highly praised what had been spoken by the Blessed One. Okay, short meditation here, just to sort of prepare our mind for our study. Again, focusing on being on a wide open space, ground smooth, soft to the touch like lapis, and ourselves surrounded by all sentient beings. So just in a wide open plain, beautiful blue sky above us, our mothers on our left, father on our right, people we love the most behind us, support and people we like the least or have issues with in front of us as objects of our prayers and compassion. And moving out from there, people from all over the world. And we can think of places where there's great tragedies and wars and suffering going on. And really hold all these people in our hearts. All beings from the animal realm or natural environments here, and from the spirit world as well. Celestial beings like different gods, goddesses, and demigods, demigoddesses, these sort of higher sort of celestial worldly beings, but nonetheless sort of celestial beings here. And countless beings in lower states of suffering and lower sort of shadow realms like the hell realms and hungry ghost realms. But we're all here together like a big happy family, meditating and doing practice. And let's just visualize in the sky like a beautiful blue sun, Buddha Vajradhara. And again, we'll just have, instead of him being on a lion throne and a lotus cushion and stuff like that, we'll just have him just floating in the sky. Buddha Shakyamuni's higher sort of angelic or mystical form in a full sort of yogic Vajra position here, and his arms crossed at his heart, holding a bell in his left hand, Dorje or Vajra scepter in his right, with the crown, beautiful jewelry and ornaments. And you can visualize a little hum letter at his heart on a sun disk or a moon disk, which one you prefer. Either the solar or lunar energies that you want to focus on. So again, just really taking this from our heart, generating refuge so we can say, I and all sentient beings, until we achieve enlightenment, go for refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. But just sort of generating that refuge from our hearts in the three jewels, Buddha jewel, Dharma jewel, and Sangha jewel. So as the great Buddhist saint and teacher Tisha said, we see all the Dharma as being pragmatically therapeutic. It's just a form of healing, and it's just an ultimate sense. So Buddha is the doctor, and Sangha are all the nurses and EMTs and the staff helping the doctor for the operation on your mind or your heart. And of course, the medicine being given is the Dharma jewel. And we can think of it being in particular the two bodhicittas, great compassion and wisdom, realizing emptiness, the two wings of a bird, wisdom and method. So that's what we're leaning on in life or taking refuge under, is that the only thing that can really help us and all sentient beings is bodhicitta, sort of great love and compassion and wisdom, realizing emptiness. So setting that refuge in our heart, our intention comes with it, which is generating bodhicitta. Everything we do may be for the awakening, enlightenment, liberation of all beings. May we become Buddha, that we just teach these paths and help all sentient beings reach this liberation. We're just starting our day here with bodhicitta, just trying to do bodhicitta all day and all night, every day. Let's make this our main sort of path in life, our main journey inside of bodhicitta. Just a quick 7 limbs to make our practice Buddhist. So prostration or respect or devotion in our hearts to Vajradhara, sort of symbolizing the 3 jewels, embodiment of all the Buddhas. Opening our heart with sort of a mind of giving here. Everything we're doing is for all sentient beings with bodhicitta, so it's a mind of giving or generosity. 2 sides of sort of declaration or owning up to your limitations and bad habits and everything else, working to change them. And at the same time, joy, rejoicing, and being happy and overjoyed of all the goodness in the world, goodness of other beings, other sentient beings, goodness in ourselves. Seeing that we have both of these sort of our sort of very human, all too human limitations, and this sort of transhuman, beyond human joy that we as sentient beings, we all have this Buddha nature within us. And asking Buddha Vajradhara and all the Buddhas to always stay with us and to teach us Dharma and to guide us. And finally, dedicate. Just we've got a motivation bodhicitta. Let's dedicate with bodhicitta. Just again, everything, all the energy being manifested that in our daily lives, our body, speech, and mind may be put, all of it, towards the liberation of all beings. Holding a purified universe at our hearts here, mandala, as a way of opening our heart in generosity, offering all beautiful things to Vajradhara. We just say, the ground sprinkled with perfume and spread with flowers, the great mountain, 4 lands, sun and moon, seen as a Buddha land and offered thus, may all beings enjoy such pure lands. Send forth this jewel mandala to you, precious Guru. Om Inam Guru Ratna Mandala, come here to Yami. So just for a bit of a visualization here, meditation, just for a few moments here, just visualize beautiful blue light and energy coming from the home ladder at Vajradhara's heart into our crown and then all through our body. So just like a big waterfall, cosmic waterfall here. This is all the, again, the 2 bodhicittas. We can just think of all love and compassion energy coming into us, as well as wisdom energy, wisdom realizing emptiness for the 2 truths. So they always do these psychology tests from the 1940s and 50s on how relaxing the color blue is, just like water, the blue sky. So beautiful blue energy, just connotating both things, just almost like symbols of emptiness, the blue sky, open blue sky, or beautiful ocean, like you're on a cruise and you look up beautiful blue ocean. Just showing sort of the totality of everything and emptiness here. So we can also just feel this energy coming out of our hearts and going in all direction, just like a waterfall here, just all the water flowing down and blessing all sentient beings around us. Now just feel that Buddha Vajradhara starts to shrink and get really, really small. It's about the size of a little sunflower seed or so. So just like a little blue diamond or a piece of blue lapis or sapphire in the sky twinkling. It's like a little star. Then very slowly, just like a falling star, comes to the crown of our head. A shining blue light enters our crown chakra and very softly and slowly descends to our heart. And when he gets to our heart, it dissolves in again, just like a huge bowl of water, and you drop a little drop of blue food coloring there and just sort of dissolves instantly into the water. But just feel like his mind and our mind become one. Again, all that love and compassion and wisdom and power become one with us. We can feel great bliss and joy here and great spaciousness just for a few minutes. We can just meditate on this here. So, okay, so just slowly coming out of meditation here and just feeling the blessing energy in our hearts. Okay, so thanks for coming, everybody. Just got to switch the glasses here. And so today's class is the second chapter of the book, which is The Origins of Tantra, which it's a great chapter. But of course, this is you could spend your entire many lifetimes studying the origins of Tantra. Even just from an academic point of view, there's just so much there. So everything we say here, of course, will be very uh, you know, not, I don't want to come out and say superficial, but it's going to be very sort of cursory and preliminary in this regard. But I think what Rob Preece wants to do is sort of change the attitude in a more Jungian way, of course, which is taking you out of sort of more of an intellectual, sort of theoretical understanding of Tantra and see that Tantra sort of belongs to sort of a different space, so to speak. So in Taoism, what I like is that this is a big thing. One of our teachers, Christina's teacher, Jill Marin down in the States, says that what you have in Taoist theory is, like you've got the five elements, which corresponds very similar to Tantra, ironically, but I don't want to get into that. But the five elements of earth, metal, water, and wood and fire correspond to five spirits or ways of knowing within ourselves. And so they call these oftentimes the five spirits, right? But what's cool about that is what he was saying is, he was talking about the Pakwa or sort of the sort of I Ching and all the hexagrams, and he was saying that that is if we have in the West external knowledge like science or physics in a sense, like in the Greek sense, what we have in Taoism and more the Chinese model is the Pakwa represents the inner art of your own subjectivity, not an objective way of knowing, but an internal way of knowing, which isn't the same thing. It's more from your own perspective rather than an objective third person perspective. And this is, you came out and said it is sort of the way of alchemy, internal alchemy. So the five spirits or five elements is the way you get into this way of knowing. That's sort of the system of getting in there. And what I like is he said there's a difference between basically these five different ways of knowing. So in particular, he said the difference between knowing from a metal element point of view and a wood element point of view. So the wood element, of course, goes with your liver and gallbladder. Metal is your lungs and your large intestine, in terms of Chinese medicine and so forth. So the metal element is responsible for feeling, the feeling in your body. So this is why it's even associated with your large intestine and your lungs, because these are the organs that process chi or energy in terms of bringing things in, taking what's best for them and eliminating them. Whereas your wood element, your liver and gallbladder are your protector, and this is what's responsible for your intellectual mind, your conceptual mind. So what he was saying is that in the West, probably since the Cartesian Revolution in the 1600s, we've gotten rid of an understanding of metal. We're always just in this intellectual wood element style of knowing, which is the element, sort of the way of knowing that's conceptual, intellectual, breaking things up, analyzing, the way of science, the way of sort of more academic information. So that's how in the West, and a lot of people think that that's the only way to know things. Like, unless we can test it scientifically or understand it rationally or logically, it doesn't exist or it's not important. But there's also a way of knowing, in this more Taoist way, which is a way of knowing through your feelings. Now, more and more over the last 20, 25 years, we're starting to see this, of course, with all the work people like Abramate have done on trauma and Tarabak, like all these people working. I mean, I remember when I first started learning this years ago, it was like, oh my God, this is like a whole revelation. But more and more people see the validity of this. And there's many wisdom traditions, not just Taoism, that sort of promote this. But I guess what I want to get at is that Tantra is working with a metal element way of knowing things, working with your feelings or with energies. And that's why Jung, because he stressed this so much in his understanding of sort of the alchemical process of psychotherapy, really stresses this. So Rinpoche, our teacher, always said that with Tantra, Sutra is the place of, your intellectual, logical mind, like at least from a, group of point of view, we study Lam Rim and Lo Rig and Lo Jung, and you study tenet theory, this kind of thing. These are, you get answers through, again, through your contemplation of the material, your analytic meditations, breaking them down, and placement meditations, you're actually realizing a conceptual object, like you're getting sort of a feeling for a particular picture of something in Buddhist theory and practice. But Tantra doesn't work that way. The answers are in the practice. They come in your experience, oftentimes through feelings or intuitions. So that's the knowledge that you need a teacher to sort of, it's absolutely essential in Tantra. It's all about the teacher, but it's a conversation between yourself and your teacher about this alchemical process, about your feelings, about your experiences. And in the end, as we'll see, it ends up being quite a solipsistic practice because it's your particular alchemy that's being done. So a lot of times the answers, even though they're shared answers because there is a lineage or a tradition, how they cash out is strictly individual in terms of your own life or your own process. And that's why it's a lot more like psychotherapy that way. Whereas when we're doing sutra, these answers, like if you're doing, what are the unique tenets of the Prasangika Madhyamika school? That's not your particular opinion or particular experience. They're actual set concepts or a set conceptual map for that you can get wrong or get right or discuss or whatever. But with Tantra, these answers aren't in a book, and that's why it's almost like an education system or a way of medicine that it's walking this path or going through the process. You get the answers while going through the process. It's not, you don't get them beforehand. They're not something you can predict in advance. And again, we've always joked, Christine and I, is that you'll have a small group of friends doing the same practice in the same community and yet come up with very different experiences of how it relates to them and even how they do the practice. So it's quite interesting that way. So I guess I just wanted to sort of debut that a little bit, that we really have to change channels here when we're studying Tantra. And that's why they call it more of a twilight practice, sort of a liminal practice, like sort of between or bardo, between times. They're using these analogies because it's a different space altogether. And that's why in Japan, I like in Tantric Buddhism in Japan, they call it magic or miku or magic. What is magic? Oftentimes in the West, we think magic is just a trick. You go see a magician, their trick, it's not real. But in other cultures, even our sort of Western roots or folk traditions, magic is real. But how does it work? What is it? Obviously, magic isn't the same as when you're doing physics or mathematics, right? So let's see what I just want to start with that, what Rob Preece says here a little bit. So he says the story of Tantra here, let's go look at my notes here. Okay, yes, okay. Is Buddha was under the Bodhi tree to get enlightened, and all the other Buddhas are light beings or holy beings in Akanisha, Pure Land, which is the highest Pure Land, manifested celestial vision of totality and initiated Buddha into this mandala. There are many different views depending on traditions and vehicles on how Buddha became enlightened. It's hard to define the origins of Tantra because the historical truth and symbolic reality here are one. Tantric or esoteric tradition originates through vision and revelation. So you can even see the when we talk about the origin story of how Buddha became enlightened from a tantric point of view, it's very different than what you would get from the more sutric point of view, or even, let's say, the Theravada tradition. We have Prince Siddhartha goes, meditates under the Bodhi tree, and gets enlightened. In the tantric tradition, oftentimes it's either Buddha's always already been enlightened and then manifests this, or Buddha gets initiated into all these mandalas by tantric deities, right? So that depending on the tradition, or if you have it, let's say, even in the Dzogchen tradition, where it's not even Buddha Shakyamuni who's teaching this or originating this, rather it's Garib Dorje about 200 BC in Swat Valley, Pakistan, that brings it in. And he is a Buddha. It's the same as Buddha Shakyamuni. However, he's initiating a new cycle of teachings in this world at this moment. So you think, well, that's kind of different, right? So, no Buddhist literature records Buddha's teaching specific tantric paths. Rather, Buddha manifested the aspect of a Buddha like Vajrapani and initiated the Tantra. So, in other words, the teaching is experienced on a psychic or visionary level to those open and ready to receive it. So because of this, tantric origins are obscure and mystical, which is why many people doubt this. So if you see this, that basically a tantra, an example of a tantra would be where Buddha manifests as a tantric deity somewhere, like let's say as Buddha Kalachakra in south of India, or like let's say Mount Kailash, he appears on top of the throne of Shiva. Shiva and Parvati ask him to teach, and he's at the mountain there in Western Tibet, manifests as Ruka Chakra Sambhara, and sort of leaves the whole mandala open there on that uh, space, that particular place. So there's no historical record for this. It's just basically different gurus have said this through their own mystical visions, different sort of yogis and yoginis who received this or were students at the time. So this is why, of course, every Tantra is so hard to study from a Western perspective, because there's no books on it, which is why it's doubted. It's just like, oh yeah, right, whatever you say. And you can see why people would even doubt this, that a Buddhist teaching, let's say, even Theravada teachings, but you're in the audience, but what you're getting is a tantric initiation. He's not appearing as just Siddhartha Gautama, now the new Buddha, but rather as Vajradhara. So everyone else sees sort of beautiful Buddha teaching, but you see Vajradhara sort of blue like sapphire, the crown, has got a Dorje belt, and all these lights and lasers are coming into your body, giving you all these initiations. So in the public talk on sutra, let's say he's just giving a mindfulness teaching, you're getting in the audience this very, very deep esoteric teaching. But who would believe you if you told anybody that audience that happened, right? They'd be like, well, I was there too, dude. He was just teaching on watching your breath. How can you say that he initiated you into this mandala? But you see, like, it's a different way of knowing. It's a different place, a different space that this is happening. So, Tantra and its symbolic expression of Buddha nature are fundamentally processes of creative revelation. They originate in visions and revelations of highly developed meditators, like the 84 Mahasiddhas. So each Tantra, there's an origin story of the vision and subsequent practice lineage. Some originate at the time of Buddhism and others later on in Tibet. And this is one way of understanding Tantra as the meaning of Tantra being continuity again, or thread. This process of transformation. There's sort of a lineage or thread from this initial psychic or mystical vision that people have of Buddha or a Buddha in a tantric form, initiating this whole cycle of teaching through a mandala. And it ends up being an unbroken continuity of lineage, which maintains its power to this present day. So, the one thing we can say about Tibetan Buddhism, which makes it special, is a lot of these lineages are unbroken. We can back them up all the way to the time of Buddha or in India at some point, thousands of years ago, which is so special. So with the Chinese invasion, 1915, crackdown in 59, they say hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lineages were lost, right? But the ones that were preserved, we have access to and we're practicing right now, which is so, so special. But these, ironically, again, had a sort of a visionary origin at some point, either in Tibet or in India, or I mean, you can have it where there's subsequent, they have like the Terma lineages from Guru Padmasambhava that are even being manifested nowadays. But there's other traditions that have this. Like if we look at a lot of First Nations traditions that were cut and destroyed because of sort of white colonialism and genocide, what's interesting is a lot of these are coming back now. But the elders that in other words, historically, they're gone because the text and the traditions, let's say, were cut or broken. But now what's happening in South America and even North America is these lineages are being reestablished on a visionary level. People having dreams and visions where their ancestors or spirits are coming back and teaching these teachings again. And so they're rebirthing these lineages on a visionary level. But that's the same thing as Tantra, ironically. Like that's just in a Buddhist perspective that we're doing. But we can see even in other religions or wisdom traditions, there's a similar process of sort of these visionary, transformative teachings coming down in our most sort of creative space of the imagination, right? Okay, and then how is this transmission passed on? Rob Preece says the real transmission is this. The experienced practitioner inspires the same deity quality in another person and passes the lineage via sort of a ceremony of initiation. So over centuries in Tibet, these ceremonies were formalized systems and shaped and structured and passed down. So this has been to preserve the purity and even precision. The form and the system, sort of took that kind of shape in Tibet. But Rob Preece says this is not the essence of Tantra in a sense. Like these rituals have been codified to pass on a lineage in a proper way. But the essence of Tantra, Rob Preece says, is this sort of original visionary transmission of energy. And that's what's most important, and that's what's really passed on. So we can learn all these rituals. And again, I don't want to be too critical nowadays, but people, dress up as a lama nowadays and do a ritual that they've seen on TikTok or something. Is that a real tantric initiation? What's being passed on here? Or can we, if we're tantric practitioners, even not knowing all these formalized old-fashioned rituals, pass on the energy of our realization? Well, yes, we can, right? And these rituals change a bit over time, but what stays the same is the thread or the essence of this energy or experience or realizations that's passed on. So Rob Preece says there's always a question of balance here to preserve the purity of the lineage, but not to lose the essence of the meaning by rigid forms or systems of ritual or cultural aspects. But he says this is a subtle question, and this I can say in over 30 years of Tibetan Buddhism is always an ongoing conversation is how much can you change over time with this? Things have to be innovated and changed because things are always changing, but how much can you change before you lose this thread or cut the thread and the lineage dies? It's a very subtle and difficult question to answer here. So, but he says Tantra is a creative process and must be allowed to be creative. Many Mahasiddhas were poets, craftsmen, musicians, others were vagabonds, drinkers, and so forth, and oftentimes sort of manifested some kind of antinomian quality to balance out the orthodoxy of these sort of rigid ritual systems of initiation here, right? Uh, yeah, he says people with control issues or comfort issues may not be able to do Tantra all that well or have issues with Tantra. Tantra is not made to make our lives safe, nor is the system the ultimate meaning here. What we have to awaken, sort of when we awaken the aspect of ourselves that is our creative vitality, this is not a comfortable process. But what we need is a creative vehicle for its expression. And he says that's why Tantra is such a good system, is it's sort of a whole, I've always said, quoting Anne Klein, Tantra is a whole performance art that allows us to really deploy our imagination and our creative energies to sort of manifest um, all this wisdom and compassion in a real beautiful way. So for the practice of Tantra to continue as a living experience, sort of as a living practice, the questions we have to struggle with here is how important is keeping or maintaining the tradition, okay? Uh, or in this a question like how important is keeping or maintaining a tradition? Is it more important or less important than developing a sort of current modern style for practitioners of this current time, right? That's, like I said, always the ongoing debate or conversation is how much do we keep, how much do we let go, how much do we adapt, how much do we really try and pass on as not a form of orthodoxy, but a form of tradition? How much is going too far? Like how much can we, how much is flexible here, right? That's sort of an ongoing conversation and tradition. And the second need is our need for creative innovation and individual expression is, well, this is a point that Rob Preece, in particular, a Western, very 21st century mode of creative individualism, creative expression, creative innovation that's different than the cultures that have been maintaining Tantra, ironically. So if we look at sort of the more Indian and Himalayan, sort of up to Northern Asian countries, these cultures have been very conservative cultures and good in a good way and a bad way. But these sort of, let's say, Tibetan culture being traditionally fairly feudal and tribal, very conservative. A lot of the cultural traditions there haven't changed in thousands of years. That way of doing culture is very different than our culture, where everyone's an individual. I want to put my own style, my own personal spin on things. So, how can Tantra sort of traverse or go from that conservative culture to more of a culture of creative self-expression? What will be gained? What will be lost in this movement, right? Um, so can Tantra be developed in the same depth and in a new creative way, but in such a way that it doesn't lose its essence, right? Because creative transformation is central to Tantra. So Rob Preece finishes this chapter by saying maybe the future is genuinely developing a deeper understanding of this process rather than holding on to formal practices that are more traditional. So we need a middle way between creative renewal and tradition. We have to stay authentic and true to our inner nature as it unfolds. Ultimately, that's the thing, is that this is going to be coming from our Buddha nature. So that's a hard question. He just sort of leaves it there hanging, which is, I think, in some ways all we can really do. This is like our teachers, as a Rinpoche has this idea, Gadden for the West, is how can we make the Galupa tradition keep what's best about it and what's traditional about it, but nevertheless have it so it's sort of an authentic, living, breathing lineage in the 21st century in Western countries. And it's again, this is a process. It's sort of an art to do this properly. It's an ongoing conversation, this and that. And it's sticky and tricky with this. As we know, there's ways we can really fail in doing this, bringing Tantra to the West or modern periods. And there's times where we can really succeed with this. But it's always just like in Buddhism, we have to do the middle way between eternalism and nihilism, between sort of an antinomianism and an orthodoxy here. Tantra can just become a museum piece. And Buddha said, my doctrine will die if people just imitate me. And you see this where we can just adopt all these traditional, let's say, Tibetan rituals, and like I say, cosplay Tibetan Buddhist. So I dress up as a Lama or Nagpa and whatever, and I do all these rituals. And I saw this years ago, not to be critical, but where people, everyone dresses up in a chuba and talks English, but with a Tibetan accent, drinks butter tea, and does all these Tibetan superstitions, thinking that somehow that will magically make you enlightened. Sort of this fidelity to this whole cultural historical package that's most important. But then on the other side is where it's, well, I don't want to do anything traditional. I'm making it the Matthew Richards lineage of Tibetan Buddhism, where I change everything and add in all my own sort of interests and prejudices, and or not at all, that we don't need any of these rituals. All that matters is just mind-to-mind transmission of emptiness, like you, me, to sit facing each other in Starbucks, and as Hegel would say in the Sense Certainty chapter, phenomenology, this, here, now, or whatever, and then whoop, there's a transmission there. So clearly these are two extremes you want to avoid. We have to go right down the messy middle. But again, this is harder than it looks. So I know Rinpoche said over the years, the most important thing is everyone just practice. That again, easier said than done. But if we just make this a living tradition and practicing this in our lives, we will get the realizations and experiences that will bring the lineage on. So it's a far more unsexier way of doing this. It's always much better to sort of pass on rituals and translate texts and run around making mandalas and stuff and Buddha statues. But the real work, I always feel, is just in people meditating and doing the practice in their day-to-day lives. And that was the thing Venerable Tenzin Palmo said years ago. There was some article I read, was like a little panel discussion of Buddhism in the West, and it was one expert after another saying, we're doing this, we're rebuilding this, we're translating this, and that. And then she was amazing but she said, okay, this is great. I'm so happy and proud of everybody. But where are the Milarepas? Where are the Mashig Labdrons? Where are the Eshe Solgyals? Where are the Karmapas? Like, where are just normal people doing their practice at home? Like, that's how lineages or Buddhism comes to Dharma, comes to different countries, is people actually meditating and doing the practice. It's wonderful to write all these books, translate all these texts, build all these temples, but at the end of the day, Buddha just told you to meditate. That's how you have a realization of emptiness, doing the practice. So just like Gampopa's last teaching that he got from Milarepa, the story, he said, this is my most special teaching, but it's so high that I'm not even going to tell you, my top student. And then, of course, Gampopa's like, okay, sorry. And then he's walking away. And then Milarepa says, no, come back. If I can't give it to you, I can't give it to everybody. Here's the special teaching. The story pulls his pants down and shows us his ass, and it's all calloused from him and he said, this is the final teaching. My bum looks like this because I've been sitting on it outside on a rock for like whatever 50 years meditating. So in other words, how I got enlightened is just the hard way, kind of like getting up 4 a.m. for hockey practice every day or hitting the gym every day. That's how I did it. That's why my ass looks like this. This is the teaching I'm giving to you. So I feel Tantra's in the same way, whereas we'll get the magical transmission is actually just through bums on seats and doing the hard work. That's where the magic is. So anyway, that's my little sermon for today. So we'll open it up. We got 10 minutes for questions. And of course, this is um, you could spend your whole life just discussing this part of just what Tantra is on a visionary level. But I will say what's funny is Buddhism is everyone makes fun of Tantra for me this way. But remember, Buddhism is this way. Every religion's this way. Every religion has a visionary origin. There, without offending any Christians out there, you can look, there is no historical evidence whatsoever for Jesus Christ. There is indirect references to the Roman historian Tacitus mentioning a guy called Jesus, but there's no actual direct source. It's just medieval monks saying he said that, right? So Kierkegaard said, one of the great Christian philosophers ever, right? Danish philosopher, 19th century, founder of existentialism, said all of us Christians would say that we would believe if we were there. So I don't really believe it in the 19th century, but if I met Jesus in person, I would believe. Then I would believe. But Kierkegaard Zelensky says, who would you meet? You take a time machine, the TARDIS back, you open the door, you walk out. You have a 30-year-old hippie carpenter, homeless guy who's unemployed, who says he's God. Do you believe that? Like the point is, of course you wouldn't. There's homeless people, crazy people, drug addicts saying that right now. You don't believe them. Why would you believe this guy? Right? So the point is, it's taking that leap of faith, it's taking it to another level, this sort of visionary, energetic, inspirational, artistic level of religion. And all religions have that origin. Mahayana Buddhism comes from a visionary origin, which is why people in Theravada countries don't believe it. Where does it come from? A Sangha gets all these teachings going to some Pure Land in a trance, right? From Buddha Maitreya. Nagarjuna goes to Nagaland. The Nagas and dragons take him under the ocean to give him all these texts that Buddha wrote, right? So at the time, all these Theravada people was like, okay, let me get this straight. You went to the bottom of the ocean and these snakes gave you this book. And this is the real essence of Buddha, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sure, dude. Right. So that's why they don't. So, in other words, even Buddhism in general has sort of like a visionary origin, right? Buddha Shakyamuni, I mean, it's just hearsay. We have these arhats, they say, thus have I heard. I wasn't even there, but I heard this happened, right? So when you look at it, all religions have, not just Tantra, really all religions have this kind of have an origin story similar to this. Right? It's all a matter of sort of a faith of confidence or how it works in your life. Anyway, any questions? I just wanted to share that with you, just my own thought. Tantra's not that weird. It's just religion, I guess you could say. So, mhm.
Well, Matthew, I
Yeah.
was going to say that, it's the tricky situation of are you crazy or are you you know, has something been revealed to you? And I'm just thinking of two people I know of that they had amazing retreats, and after it I was like, oh, I think they're kind of crazy now because they seemed unbalanced rather than something had been revealed to them. So then it's like, oh, so this is where you need somebody you trust who's a teacher who can tell you, are you crazy? Or did something amazing happen for you that's real?
Yeah.
Or have you just screwed up your energies and it's like, no, you actually just need, some putin and you need something to settle all this down because now you're seeing stuff, but that's not it either.
And that's the hardest question is how do you know when you're right or wrong? Which is they say you always listen to your teachers, the people who love you close to you. But even then, that's the best you can do. And you just hope that all your lamas or teachers, you say, you know what, Matthew, I think you're just nuts. Like or whatever, like, like that didn't work that retreat, or you're unbalanced, or you've got a chi imbalance, or hey, I know you have a bipolar diagnosis, you ran around to this retreat. Maybe that's what's really happening here. But sometimes you have it even in religious traditions where the jury's out. Like like I wish it would be really easy, but this happens all the time, even within traditions where you have revelations. And it's just, but I always figure like if it's real, it's like, for instance, Master Labdron is sort of, that's the only lineage that goes from Tibet back to India, right? So she sort of originates the whole chit teachings, and everyone doubted her because like, who's this woman, kind of farmer woman, thinks she's this big goddess and stuff. So it was quite interesting. And of course, she came across as a complete nut. And these pandits come from India. And what does she do? She completely defends herself using just basic Buddhism. So they just thought, okay, she's a freak. If this gets out of hand, it's gonna sweep. She's a nut. Let's humiliate her publicly, and then that'll be the end of it. And then they go to bed, and she's like totally awesome, right? And has all the scriptural stuff. And she's like, look, you don't have to practice this, you don't have to believe me, but this isn't coming from nowhere. Like these are the origins. And they're like, well, hey, she's got all the sources. Like, it's legit. Right? So I always figure if you have these kinds of things, the good thing is if it's in your subsequent life or practice, it can be integrated properly or grounded. But again, it's probably a little messier than that, as you know, right? Uh, with every religion that's like that. I mean, friend, again, not to put Mormonism down, because a lot of my mom's friends are Mormons in the second book of Mormon, which is okay, star spirits are aliens, teach this. Jesus actually taught in the United States. Joseph Smith, a convicted felon who ended up being murdered by a mob for stealing money, is the new prophet. The Book of Mormon is the real Bible. The promised land of Zion is the United States. You can become an angel like a tantric deity by doing all these practices. Do you believe that? Well, Mormons do. Like I'm just saying there isn't so, and I'm not saying that to make fun, but you can do that with every religion, and every religion makes fun of every other religion by doing the exact same thing, right? Uh,
Mhm.
Rinpoche, who is amazing, one of the great Dzogchen met when he met Thomas Merton, right? He's like, oh, Jesus Lama. He's like, I heard you worship this being that came back to life. Well, in Tibet, we call those zombies. They're called Rolungba, and there's a special kind of mantra that you can put that energy back in. And then Thomas Burton's like, well, no. He's like, Jesus is the Dharmakaya mind or whatever. And then Chatterton's like, okay, now I get it. Now I understand Christianity, right? So it's kind of funny that way, right? So, but thank you. Good point. Good point. And I always think practically, yeah, like, can you integrate that experience? How grounded are you after? That's always a good, a bit of a litmus test, right? So anyway, Christine, I think you're going to say something. Sorry.
Yeah, I have a question about one of the things that Rob Preece said in his book, and it's a little bit out of context, so I don't know if you can help me with it. But I'd like to kind of flesh out some understanding of this phrase, intrinsic substance independent of consciousness.
Okay, I'd have to look at, is that in this chapter here? Or is it in
It
the,
is in this chapter, and I was just pawing around to try to find out where it is, and I got interested in your conversation with Maureen and lost my
can
thread.
you
So
take a look and answer it in the next class or something? I'll have to just look at the context, Christine, for that. Like, I don't know if that's sort of a Jungian point he's making or a Buddhist point he's making. Like, that with something that is independently existing outside of conscious unchanging is usually what's quote unquote refuted by Buddhism. That's the inherent existence that does not exist, right? I mean,
right.
usually. So I don't know if that's what he's saying, right? Or not. And this is like in a Jungian point of view, the only thing that is outside of consciousness, you could say, is archetypes as they are in and of themselves, almost like a noumenal reality. But the point is that from a Jungian point of view, from what I understand, that's not what's important, is because these things always cash out to you in your own experience, tailored to you, right? So even if Jung believes in something that's quote unquote inherently existent, that's not what's important. What's important is how that appears in your mind almost karmically, right? So, but I'll have to look at the reference here and see what that means. So if that
I'll, I'll go back and see if I can find where it is and maybe put it in some context and send you a note with that.
and then that would be great. And I could
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so
Thank you.
you're welcome. So any other questions before we end here? Any other, it's all good. So good. Okay, great. Well, thank you. And this is a fascinating topic, really, on this. It's really, really beautiful. But I always like the idea that just the way things are empty, there's no real answers to this, and to be able to sit in this space where it's just Yeah. Things work, but we don't know how they do work, but they do work. So there we go. And that's what makes them special. So I'm going to be away for a couple weeks here just with work. So I'll do some recordings and put those up as quick as I can as we move throughout the book, maybe the next 2 or 3 chapters. These chapters are fairly short, so we can sort of get through them. And then the first 2 weeks of August, I'll be back to do live classes then. Okay, so thank you. Let's just take a moment to dedicate here before I sort of stop the recording. So, by blessings of all holy beings, the truth of karma, cause and their effects, power of pure intention, and bodhicitta, may all of our dharma wishes be fulfilled and all sentient beings reach awakening. Okay, thank you.